Good evening and welcome to Ask the Specialists. I'm Amy Robinson. Tonight we ask the small business specialists on CMU Public Television. Tonight we ask the small business specialists on CMU Public Television. Your calls fuel this conversation, so please join us. First, we want to introduce our guests. Welcome to Tony Fox, Michigan Small Business and Development Technology Center. And Tony, welcome. Tell us briefly what your organization does.
Sure thing, and thanks for having me. The Small Business and Technology Development Center is a partner program of the Small Business Administration, and our work revolves around helping existing businesses grow as well as helping new companies launch. We do so throughout the state of Michigan, actually. The state's divided into regional offices, so there should be an office nearby wherever our viewers are located. And the primary service we provide is one-on-one counseling. And so we'll sit down at no cost to the individual business owner or potential business owner and help them explore what their path to success might be. We also have a variety of trainings that we provide, ranging from no cost to some fee-based, where we're recovering cost. They can range from a 3-hour workshop through a 30-hour comprehensive business planning course. And then finally, we have access to market research that often companies don't have access to unless they become a client of ours, and then we're able to provide access to them at no cost, helping them make more informed business decisions.
All right, fantastic. Welcome.
Thanks.
And welcome to our other guest, Erin O'Brien with Central Michigan University's Research Corporation. Welcome, Erin. And tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. Central Michigan University Research Corporation. We're a business accelerator in which we help businesses commercialize their technology, businesses or entrepreneurs, primarily those with some sort of intellectual property associated with them. Sometimes that's a product. It's the easiest way to categorize, I'd say. But we also have a business incubator in which we have a facility. It's kind of on the south end of the university campus. And we have office space and wet laboratory space. So for those companies that are getting up and started might need some office space to do so. And so we have that as well. We provide a variety of different services based on what the client's needs are. Happy to see Tony here this evening with the Small Business and Technology Development Center, because we interact very well between the two organizations to make sure that the entrepreneur gets exactly what they need, so they don't have to stop and think about where they need to go, but they come in and we'll make sure they get the right resources at the right time.
Fantastic, and we'll talk about some of the advice you have for small business owners. If you have a small business or are thinking of starting one, this is your time to call and get some ideas and bounce some questions off of our experts tonight. So let's start at the ground level. I have an idea. I think I'd like to start a business. I guess before even the process of how, let me ask you, how do I even know if it's a good idea? Erin?
Sure. When you're thinking about a business, and again, what CMURC specializes in is more of those product-based organizations, those with the potential of high growth and high technology associated with those. The first thing we take a look at is there a problem in which that idea would be solving that problem or that issue? So if you kind of look at it in the context of what the problem is, what your product or your idea would be doing to solve that problem, and then the competitive advantage in which your company or your idea, your product would have in the marketplace. So that's the way that I like to keep it in context. You know, is there a problem in which your product is solving, and then what are the benefits that makes it better than what currently exists?
Okay, and then Tony, you mentioned kind of marketing services that you have. So what should an individual do in terms of maybe looking at the market if they have a service or a product? How could they measure it? Do they need to come in and see you, or are there things they can do on their own?
Well, they're both, really. You know, a lot of the groundwork is done by the individual entrepreneur in terms of doing web research, doing anecdotal observation types of research, which seems pretty simple, but it's really valuable. If they get into a space where they're having trouble finding answer to a particular question, such as, you know, where is my target market located, something like that, we do have access to databases that we can crawl through and see what sorts of information that they could use, such as, you know, demographic distributions based on certain geographies, people's propensity to do different activities, which is kind of fun because you can look at different ways to cross-pollinate, if you will, with your marketing efforts. So if there's a sweet spot with your clientele and they also have a high propensity to do something else, maybe there's an opportunity for some strategic alliance that way. But yeah, I would agree totally with Erin, and it really starts, the first step a business should be looking at is that market. And sometimes people come to us and they get the cart a little bit ahead of the horse, and they're looking to form the company, spending money already, and they still haven't really defined who that willing and able market is that they're going after. And that can be challenging.
Yeah, that's a great point. And people get caught up in thinking, okay, what would the name of my company be? What would the logo look like? Those types of things. And really they need to make sure that there's somebody willing to purchase whatever it is that they're offering.
And let's define our terms briefly for a minute here. We heard from a viewer in Beulah saying, what constitutes a small business? 10 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees? What are we talking about?
Yeah, and everybody has their own definition, it seems. The SBA definition of small is actually typically under 500 employees, and I say typically because there are certain industry segments that measure it a little bit differently, but 500 employees is quite significant, and we're not talking just the micro businesses, if you will, the handful of employees, but we really do work across that spectrum, especially with the SBTDC. We have different teams actually that focus on those different growth stages. We have a growth team that focuses on companies that are in excess of 10 employees, over $1 million in sales, and helping them with defining their strategy plan. So it really, the SBA's definition, 500 employees or less, but it means a lot of things to a lot of people.
500 employees or less gives you a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we received a call from Leland, and let's talk online for just a moment, because they're mentioning here they have a small online business, and should they be charging sales tax? What are the responsibilities in that regard? I know, Tony, we were talking about it ahead of time, and you had some thoughts on that.
Sure. I think one of the most useful things you can do is to start off on the michigan.gov/business website. Make sure that you're registered for all the appropriate taxes that you should be paying. When you get online, it's a little bit more unique. There are different considerations depending on what state you're actually selling in. And really, you get into a space that you should be talking to your team, and part of your team is going to be your CPA, who should be knowledgeable about tax issues and how they relate specifically to your business. So that would be my recommendation. If they have a specific tax issue, get with your CPA.
Okay, very good, thanks. And Erin, I want to talk a little more about money, because that has to be a component when someone's trying to launch a business enterprise. And I think maybe there's an idea out there that there's perhaps grant money that the government may have for small business entrepreneurs. What's the situation there?
Sure. There's definitely a number of opportunities when it comes to funding. I think one of the things we should clarify is when people talk about free money, grants and things of that nature, that they should always be cautious. There are a number of different scams, I'll say, out there that people are trying to solicit individuals to get them to buy into something that they probably shouldn't buy into. But that's why there's resources like the Small Business Technology Development Center and the CMU Research Corporation. A lot of times people focus a lot on money, and they maybe need to take a look at their business model, what their plan is, maybe look at how they're configuring things, and money is not always the thing that they might actually need at that time. So, but we do, Central Michigan University Research Corporation, we're one of 15 of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation's smart zones, and because of that we do have separate pools of funds available, again, those that fit within the criteria of the 21st century jobs companies, advanced battery, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, alternative energy, homeland security and defense, those types of companies in which there's the potential for high growth, high technology. There are different sources available to help a company achieve different milestones and overcome some of the issues that they might have. At CMURC, we focus primarily on equity financing and then facilitating the Smart Zone funding sources. And then we work very closely with Tony's shop in that he has a specialty more in the debt financing arena.
And so there are funds available for certain sectors, if you will, or certain phases of development. But as we were talking earlier, I guess I was getting the impression that as far as maybe a new business entrepreneur saying, gosh, I just need that seed money to get started, you know, that maybe there are grants. Maybe they're not as plentiful as people think?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconception, I think, because it's hard to say there aren't any grants, because there are segments where there's high technology or there's a governmental need where there's an interest in something that'll benefit the greater whole of the community. But if it's a traditional type business, you know, it's very hard. It's really near impossible to find grant dollars for that. And really, the impetus for starting a business shouldn't be to get a grant. You know, and so sometimes people call with that misconception. We can clear things up as to what is out there and what is not, and then they still plow forward, and that's what we like to see. I would also share some of the scams tend to follow a similar pattern, and you know, if anybody's asking for money up front to get money in the future, that should be a red flag. And we're happy if you see something that's tangible, you have a source, we'd love to look into it, and if there is anything there, that's great. But try not to spend money up front on some of those. We've had some clients in the past that have unfortunately done that.
Okay, very good. Thanks for that advice. We're taking your calls for the Small Business Specialists here on CMU Public Television. We encourage you to help keep the conversation going and ask them whatever questions are on your mind about your small business or your idea for the future. We heard from Grant, an individual who started a business 2 years ago. They currently have a DBA. Is there an advantage to choosing to go to an LLC?
Sure. You know, an LLC, a limited liability company, affords some separation of your personal assets from your business assets. It also provides you some flexibility when you get into the taxation situation of a company. Having an LLC is one option to get that limited liability. There are also S corporations and some other entities that could be considered. Really need to talk to an attorney to make that decision based on the individual circumstance of the company and the personal side of things, because there are tax implications on both the business and personal side. The LLC is also more of a statewide designation, which is good when you get into things like contract law and having your name on things, your business name. It's more portable in a sense than the DBA is.
Okay, very good, thanks. Erin, let me ask you, what does a good business plan consist of? And how do we continue a business plan through the life of the business?
That's a good point. A business plan is always something that needs to be looked at and continue to evolve. A lot of times when we're working with companies, the business plan is a means for funding. Obviously, the components behind a business plan, when you're looking at the various pieces between operations, your competitive advantage, your marketing, who your actual customers are, all of those things are important in different realms. Again, the point in which I always emphasize with business plans is they're a means to funding. And besides that, you should spend your time working on your company, doing the right research, and going after, and again, taking a look at what your customer need actually is and how you can achieve that need and to become a successful company.
All right, thanks. We heard from Auburn. Someone asking, this viewer asking, what's the best way to market a service industry business? Tony?
Well, it depends on who your target market is and what service it is. You know, if you can identify specific characteristics that are most advantageous and resonate best with what you're providing, and then you want to plan around that and really focus on them. When I talk with clients about target market, I like to say that, you know, the target market's where you're going to spend your time and your effort at trying to attract some clientele. But you know, at the end of the day, you're going to sell to the people who are going to buy from you. So you know, when you're thinking of your target market, you know, what works best for you? What resonates best with yourself if you're not sure where to start, and then test that in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. And I think with any industry, and Tony hit on it as far as a target market is considered, a lot of people think, oh, I have this product or service and I'll go ahead and everybody is my customer. And it really is important to do some research, to get those data points, and to really focus on one area in which you can make the biggest impact and spend your time. Otherwise, you might be chasing around a lot of people and getting nowhere.
You know, you really circle back to this point quite a bit here. So is this a common mistake that maybe new entrepreneurs make? Is, you said, Erin, before, they maybe kind of get excited about their idea.
Absolutely.
And I think they need that energy, but maybe is that a step that gets commonly overlooked? Because I've heard you talk about it a few times now.
Yeah, I would say that again, you know, it's people, it's exciting. You have an idea, you have a product, you know, maybe you've made something and you're really excited to get it out there. And I think a lot of times people then view it with kind of rose-colored glasses and they think, well, everybody wants this and everybody's going to run out and buy this. And it really is important to stop and take a look. And, you know, the nice part is you can always test a few people out and say, hey, what do you think of this? And what do you think we can do to make it better? So obviously you need customers, so their points are the most important.
All right.
I think it's even quite natural with the service business, because if you're good at something, so good that somebody's willing to pay you for that, you start off with what you're doing. And then that sort of escalates into a business, and it becomes the full-time, you know, the full scope of what your focus is. And then you have to be able to pull yourself out of that and look at the business itself. So instead of working in the business, do some work on that business, and that's where you get into seeing some of these things emerge. And we have the frameworks to help people walk through that, because a lot of business owners haven't done a business plan per se, and while they're covering a lot of the bases in a business plan, there's some value in writing it down and reflecting on it and updating it quite frequently to be relevant.
And it's easy to get bogged down on the day-to-day operations. A lot of times, an entrepreneur, you start bringing on employees, and then you start thinking about things like payroll and operations and management of those employees. And it is really important that they step outside to continue to allow their company to grow and to continue to push it forward instead of getting bogged down. And those are some of the things that we can help them take a look at and make sure that they're aware of all the different things they need to be thinking about.
If you have an idea in your head and you're excited to get going with a business, we have the experts here to help you figure out some of the nuts and bolts. Give us a call and join in the conversation with our small business experts tonight on CMU Public Television. Now, when we're talking about marketing and identifying your audience, two businesses come to my mind. One is an individual I know who builds, you know, the large dumpsters, and they have the plastic lids. Well, he builds the plastic lids for dumpsters. So not what you typically think of as a glamorous business, but certainly one with a demand. It's, I understand, going well for him. And then the flip side, we have down the road in Clare, our little Cops and Donuts. You know, that's gotten a great deal of attention because they kind of tagged into this quirky idea. What do you typically see in a day? I mean, you're talking a lot of kind of serious products in your shop, and what do you find works most typically? Is it the serious, everybody needs one kind of product, or is you catch a quirky idea and you get lucky?
Yeah, I always say that you never can tell when people come in the office. You never know which ideas are really going to make it. It really comes down to a few items. The idea itself, but then also the talent behind it. You know, I always say somebody sold the pet rock and made a lot of money doing so. You know, what we work with at CMURC, and how I referred to earlier, talking about more product-based, and when you were talking about the gentleman that sells the lids, it reminded me of, one of the things we take a look at with companies is you have an idea, you have a product, and everybody just sees the product and then sees it in a consumer's hand. A lot of times with product-based companies, it's more of a B2B sale, a business-to-business sale, and so you might not be selling directly to that end consumer. So identifying the different people in that supply chain, who your actual customer is. Again, it might not be that person at the end of the day that's lifting the lid of the trash can, but it might be a trash can manufacturer that they'd want to partner with, or that would purchase that product. So again, multiple pieces and components involved with commercializing a product versus a service.
What do you think, Tony? Can you spot a winner?
No. You know, I have I'm not sure who to attribute the quote to, but on my wall, you know, an idea isn't worth really anything. It's the execution of that into something that's marketable and somebody's willing to buy. And that's it. So when you see an idea, it might be a great idea, but if there's not implementation that follows that idea, it's just that, an idea. You know, in terms of the types of companies we work with, it really runs the industry gamut. So we work with a handful of manufacturers, we work with retail companies, we work with service companies, and then some of the more niche markets as well, such as ag and the like. In terms of size standards, again, we work with companies who are pre-venture, right on through to a company that may be over 100 years old, and looking at how they can update and make things a little bit better in the current environment.
Let me ask you, Erin, how important is the web for a new business owner, an entrepreneur?
It's important. It really is. I mean, anymore when people hear about a company, a product, they Google it. You know, they Bing it. They search to find that product because they heard about it, or maybe somebody directed them that way. But the important part is the whole marketing plan in general. You know, that is one component. However, just because you build a website doesn't mean you're going to get traffic to it. So there's the other marketing components in which drives traffic to your website to see your product or whatever it is you have. There are multiple companies that are selling only on the web and are doing different social media and campaigns behind it as well. But it's holistically the marketing plan versus just the web and creating a website. So just something to keep in mind.
So again, the web is a tool, but you need to indicate how and know how you're going to use it.
Absolutely.
And Tony, you were talking about a workshop coming up to help people with that very issue.
Absolutely. We have actually some representatives from Google coming up November 27th to our Mount Pleasant Doane Center location. Registration information can be found on our website at michigansmallbusinesssuccess.org, so people can register right there and find the exact details. There are two different segments that we're offering, and the first is getting your business online, and then the afternoon session is actually for existing businesses who have a website to look at different ways and techniques that they can actually optimize that website to get more traffic and the right traffic. And again, yeah, the website is you know, a necessary thing, but surprisingly enough, a lot of companies still don't have a decent or any web presence at all, so that's sort of low-hanging fruit for getting a bit more competitive advantage.
As we talk about businesses in Michigan and throughout the nation, we hear often about the healthcare industry. And we have a question here. It's fairly specific, but let's see what you can tell us about it, and maybe it'll branch into other issues as well. From Manistee, someone who'd like to open a home healthcare business, and in this instance, wondering where they would apply for a license. So can you talk about licensing or other thoughts that would go into that kind of business development?
Sure. The first pass at any startup, you know, once you've found that you have a market and you sort of have a game plan to access that market, in the state of Michigan, we have a wonderful website. It's a one-stop shop for, I mentioned it earlier, for tax purposes, but also gets into some of the licensure needs. So that website is, again, michigan.gov/business. An individual sets up an account on that website, can go through, answer questions as it relates to their business, and they would get into the industry classification for that scenario. After they've answered all the questions, it produces a shopping cart, a virtual shopping cart that has different forms that need to be filled out. It gives you an estimated time as to how long it'll take to process that, and if there happens to be a cost associated with it, that's also included. So that's really handy to sit down and work through that process. Your output is then your action plan, to at least in the short term.
Okay, thank you. And we have less than 5 minutes if you'd still like to get your questions in for our small business specialists. Erin, we have a question from Everett. What obstacles would you run into trying to franchise a small business?
I think the key in franchising comes down to, again, what currently exists. You know, what are they trying to franchise? Would they be competing against? In a franchise model, you might have done something already. You might do it good, as Tony mentioned. You know, with a service company, you do it well. That's how you're in business. But the next step in taking it into a franchise is quite a bit more complicated. Just because you've proven it out in one location doesn't mean it would prove out in another location. There's many of varying factors between, again, location, what else exists, what else you'd be competing with. So in a franchise, there's multiple pieces. Comes down a lot to processes and procedures in your plan, in your training, in your procedures. So you've done it once, you've proven it, that's fantastic. Then, you know, document put it in writing, and then maybe try and open up 1 or 2 other pilot locations where you can prove it out a number of other times before you go into actually trying to franchise. Just because you have an idea doesn't mean you'll be able to sell those franchises. And there's many different franchising models as well. Those that continue to be owned by individuals and companies, and then those in which they're looking for other people to buy into their franchise. So multiple pieces, but all things we can help you with.
Have you found any trends? Is it better to perhaps tap into a well-known existing franchise, or do new ones pan out well too? A new company with a newer franchise.
Are you, just for clarification on the question, are you looking for, if you were interested in buying into a franchise, so maybe I want to open up a Fazoli's or something, and then you would purchase that, or
I mean, a company that's been franchising for a long time. Is there strength and experience in getting into a company that's been doing this for a long time as opposed to a newer one?
Right. Yeah, I think that anytime you can take a look at different case studies and what's been done, and kind of learn lessons from other people that have been there before, it's a good thing.
I think a lot of it comes down to the individual. You know, everybody's unique, and I think certain franchises have more rigidity to them, which may resonate with some, but if somebody wants more flexibility, then they may look another direction. I think it's a great idea to talk to other franchise owners to see what their feel is about the franchisor. And we've had some clients that have explored that. And I think another scenario you want to look at is, you know, looking at the path of having a franchise and also looking at the path of doing it independently, just so you see both scenarios.
Right.
All right, very good. And we have just a short bit of time left, but I want to make sure that you both convey to the viewers how they can get in touch with you if they want to bring an idea to you or get more information through the services that you have. Tony, how can they reach you?
The best way to reach us is going to be through our website at the michigansmallbusinesssuccess.org. And the reason being, when you access our website, there's a request for counseling link. Once it's completed, it'll look at your county, and based on that county, you'll be sent to the according regional office. So it's just going to be the most efficient way to do that. There's a lot of resources on our website as well that don't require you to become a client, but you can access there.
Great, great. And Erin?
Our website is the best way. It's www.cmurc.com.
And now, can they fill out a request for information there? Can they contact us? A contact us page, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll be able to take a look at different companies that we've worked with, and there's some different stories there as well to give them an idea of what is a good company that we can really help.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank our guest, Tony Fox with the Michigan Small Business and Technology Development Center, Erin O'Brien with the Central Michigan Research Corporation. Thanks too to our phone volunteers. Thanks to you for fueling our conversation today. And I invite you to join us next week for Ask the CPAs. I'm Amy Robinson. Have a good night.